The day everything changed. The morning sun had just begun to spill its golden light over the sprawling hills of Sterling Estate. The driveway stretched like a silver ribbon, curving past manicured gardens and rows of imported palm trees. Grace Johnson was already awake long before the sun, as she had been for the past 5 years. She moved quietly through the east wing of the mansion, her well-worn shoes barely making a sound on the polished marble floors. In her hands, she carried a silver tray of fresh towels for the guest rooms, her mind already planning the day ahead. Grace was 34 years old, tall, with warm brown skin and deep, intelligent eyes that seemed to hold stories far beyond her years. She had been a widow for nearly a decade, raising her younger sister on her own while working 2, sometimes 3 jobs. When she was hired by Alexander Sterling, the tech billionaire whose face was often on magazine covers, she had promised herself she would stay invisible, just do her job and never cause trouble. The world she worked in now was not her world. It was a place of chandeliers, silk curtains, and cars worth more than she could imagine. But that morning, trouble found her. She was passing the open door to the game room when she heard a faint voice. It was high-pitched, shaky, and familiar. She stopped mid-step, tilting her head. "Dad? Dad, I can't breathe right. I don't know where I am." It was Ethan Sterling. The 12-year-old son of Alexander Sterling was sitting on the floor of the game room, his phone clutched to his ear. His blonde hair was messy, his usually cheerful face pale. Grace froze, her heart thudding. She stepped inside. "Ethan? What's wrong?" He looked up, startled. "Grace, don't tell anyone, please." Grace knelt beside him. "Are you hurt?" He shook his head quickly, then winced, clutching his chest. "I snuck out early. I wanted to meet some friends from school, but then, I don't know, I think something's wrong. My chest hurts, I'm dizzy." Grace's stomach tightened. Ethan had been diagnosed with asthma and a mild heart condition, something she had overheard during a conversation between Mr. Sterling and a doctor. She knew that if his condition flared up and he didn't get help in time, it could be deadly. "Where are you right now?" she asked gently. He hesitated. "Somewhere near the old highway. My friends ditched me. I was trying to walk back." His voice cracked. "It's so far, Grace." She felt a rush of panic that was more than 30 minutes away. "Ethan, listen to me. I'm going to come get you. Right now." The boy's eyes filled with tears. "Please hurry." Grace stood, her mind racing. She grabbed her phone, dialing the driver's number. No answer. She tried again. Still nothing. She called the second driver. Straight to voicemail. The estate's security team, out on patrol, miles away. She glanced toward the garage. In the center of that marble-floored space, under the soft glow of ceiling lights, sat a car unlike anything Grace had ever touched in her life. Sleek, golden-orange paint, low to the ground, every curve screaming power. The Lamborghini Aventador. The keys. She had just seen them on the side table in the hallway. Her hands trembled. If she took that car even for a second, it could mean the end of her job, maybe even jail. But if she didn't, Ethan could die. Her breathing quickened. This was the kind of choice no one should have to make. But life didn't give her time to debate. She thought of her late husband's voice telling her, "Sometimes the right thing is the hardest thing to do, Grace." She looked toward the hallway again, and that's when she made the decision. Her shoes clicked on the marble as she ran to the table. She snatched the keys, and their metallic jingle sounding far too loud in the empty hall. Her heart pounded as she jogged into the garage, her reflection flashing in the Lamborghini's mirror-like paint. Sliding into the driver's seat felt like stepping into another universe. The leather was soft, warm from the morning sun. Her hands gripped the steering wheel as she pressed the start button. The engine roared to life, its deep growl echoing through the garage. Grace flinched, whispering under her breath, "Lord, please let me get there in time." She pulled out of the garage, the massive gate opening slowly before her. As soon as there was space, she pressed the pedal. The car leapt forward like a wild animal finally unleashed. The city blurred around her. She wasn't thinking about the laws she was breaking or the consequences she would face. She was thinking about the boy's pale face, his shaky voice. She was thinking about how her own sister could have been in his place once, and how she would have wanted someone, anyone, to do whatever it took to save her. She didn't know it yet, but cameras on the street were already catching the sight of a black maid in a billionaire's Lamborghini, weaving through traffic at impossible speeds. People would soon start talking, and by the time the day ended, Grace Johnson's name would be known across the city, for better or for worse. And just ahead, on the side of a lonely stretch of road, Ethan Sterling was waiting, his life hanging by a thread. The impossible decision. The Lamborghini's engine roared like a beast as Grace Johnson pushed it harder than she ever imagined possible. Her palms were slick with sweat, and she kept her eyes locked on the ribbon of road ahead. Each second she lost was another second Ethan Sterling's condition could worsen. She'd been driving for less than 5 minutes, but her heart felt like it had been racing for an hour. In her mind, she replayed the short conversation with Ethan, his weak voice breaking through the phone. That fear in his tone. It was the kind you couldn't fake, the Aventad, or responded to every twitch of her hands, hugging sharp turns with a smoothness that made her stomach flip. She didn't know much about sports cars, but she could feel the raw power in this machine. It wasn't just a car, it was a missile on wheels, and she was gambling everything by using it. Her phone buzzed in the cup holder. She glanced down. Alexander Sterling's name glowed on the screen. For a split second, Grace considered answering, but she knew it would only slow her down. Worse, if she heard the cold anger in his voice, it might shake her resolve. So she ignored the call. Right now, her only mission was Ethan. She tore down the old highway, scanning the sides of the road. The morning mist still clung to the edges of the asphalt, and the hum of the engine filled the air like a storm. Then, there. On the right side of the road, near an abandoned billboard, a small figure was hunched over. Ethan. Grace's stomach twisted. She slammed the brakes, the tires screeching so loud it echoed off the empty fields. The car stopped barely 10 feet away from him. She jumped out before the wheels had fully settled. Ethan! He turned his head slowly. His face was pale, his lips slightly blue, his breathing shallow. I couldn't. His voice trailed off into a cough. Grace ran to him, dropping to her knees. She slid one arm around his back, the other supporting his head. His pulse was fast, too fast, and his breaths came in shallow bursts. It's okay, she whispered, trying to keep her voice steady. I've got you now. She half-carried, half-guided him toward the car. Opening the passenger door, she helped him in gently, fastening the seatbelt around his trembling body. Grace. My chest. It hurts. His words were barely audible. She swallowed hard. I know, honey. We're going to the hospital right now. Slamming the driver's door shut, she restarted the engine, her mission, and raced. There were 2 hospitals nearby, but one was 15 minutes away and the other was 25. The closer one didn't have a specialist for Ethan's condition. The farther one did. Her hands gripped the wheel. 15 minutes could save his life, but the wrong 15 minutes could end it. She made the choice. She pressed down on the accelerator and aimed the Lamborghini toward the farther hospital. The Aventador leapt forward again, the speedometer climbing faster than her breath could keep up. Ethan's breathing sounded like paper tearing, uneven, fragile. Talk to me, Ethan, she urged, her eyes darting between the road and him. Tell me about your dog. What's his name again? Cooper, he mumbled. He's a golden retriever, likes socks. Grace forced a small smile. That's right. And when you get better, you're going to throw him a big party, okay? You can even give him all the socks you want. A faint smile flickered on his lips, but it vanished as another wave of pain hit him. Traffic appeared ahead, a slow-moving delivery truck blocking most of the lane. Grace's heart leapt. She couldn't afford delays. She shifted lanes, the car's engine screaming as it surged past the truck. In her rear-view mirror, she caught sight of flashing lights far behind. A police car. Her stomach sank. She knew exactly what it looked like. A black woman in a stolen Lamborghini, speeding dangerously. She didn't slow down. She couldn't. The sirens grew louder, but she kept her focus on the road ahead. She prayed they would follow her to the hospital instead of trying to stop her. Every second counted. The city skyline began to rise in the distance. She could almost see the hospital now, just a few more minutes. But in the pit of her stomach, she knew this was only the beginning. Because once she reached the hospital, the questions would start. And the truth, that she'd taken the car without permission, might not matter to people who only saw the color of her skin and the cost of the vehicle she was driving. She tightened her grip on the wheel. If she had to, face a storm after this, so be it. As long as Ethan lived to see another day, it would be worth every consequence. The high-speed rescue. The hospital's tall white building was finally in sight when the flashing red and blue lights in Grace's rearview mirror became blinding. She could hear the sirens bouncing off the glass buildings around them, growing louder, angrier. Ethan's head tilted toward her, his voice barely above a whisper. "Grace, are we in trouble?" Her eyes stayed locked on the road. "Not you, sweetheart. Never you. Just hang on for me a little longer." Her chest felt like it was in a vice. She knew the police would see her as a suspect, not a savior. She knew they might try to pull her over, take her out of the car, waste precious seconds Ethan didn't have. But she couldn't stop. Not now. She pressed harder on the accelerator, weaving through the light morning traffic. The Lamborghini roared, its engine note turning every head on the street. Pedestrians froze as the golden blur shot past. Up ahead, the hospital's ER entrance glowed in red letters. Grace aimed for it like her life depended on it. Because it did. The police car was now right behind her. Through the side mirror, she saw the officer pointing toward the curb, motioning for her to stop. She didn't. Instead, she swerved into the ER's ambulance lane, tires screeching against the pavement. The car hadn't even stopped moving when Grace flung open her door and rushed to Ethan's side. "Stay with me, Ethan," she said, her voice trembling as she unbuckled him. His body felt lighter than it should have, his skin clammy. Two security guards and a nurse burst through the sliding doors. "What's going on?" the nurse shouted. "He's having an attack. Heart and breathing trouble. He needs help now," Grace cried, her voice cracking. The nurse's training took over instantly. She grabbed a gurney from the wall, and together, she and Grace lifted Ethan onto it. His small hands gripped Grace's sleeve, his lips trying to form words she couldn't quite hear. "I'm right here," she whispered, walking beside him as they rushed inside. The automatic doors closed behind them, blocking the police from following into the emergency ward without clearance. Grace's heart pounded. She knew she had only bought herself minutes before the questions began. Inside, doctors swarmed Ethan. One checked his airway while another clipped monitors to his chest. Grace stood back, wringing her hands, trying to breathe. Then the voice came, sharp, commanding. "You, step away from the patient." Grace turned to see a hospital security officer flanked by two uniformed police officers. Their eyes flicked from her face to the Lamborghini key still in her trembling hand. "Ma'am, is that your car outside?" one officer asked. She swallowed. "No, it belongs to—" "Then you need to come with us." Grace's eyes darted to Ethan. His oxygen mask was in place now, his eyelids fluttering. "Please, I can explain, but not now. That boy is my boss's son. He was going to die if I didn't." The officer cut her off. "You can explain downtown." The nurse, overhearing, stepped forward. She brought him here in time. Without her, he wouldn't have made it. But the police weren't swayed. One took her arm, not roughly but firmly. Grace's chest tightened as she realized how quickly this was spiraling. She didn't resist, but her voice was steady as she looked them in the eye. "Then take me in. But make sure you tell his father that I didn't steal that car for joyriding. I stole it to save his only child." The officers exchanged glances. The younger one hesitated, then lowered his voice. "Ma'am, your boss is already here." Grace froze. "What?" She turned her head toward the entrance, and there, striding through the sliding doors with an expression somewhere between fury and fear, was Alexander Sterling himself. His eyes went from her to the gurney, and back again. And in that split second, Grace knew the real confrontation was about to begin. The race against death. Alexander Sterling's footsteps echoed sharply on the hospital's tiled floor. The billionaire's usual calm, composed expression was gone, replaced with a storm of worry and anger. His tailored suit looked out of place here among the rushing nurses and beeping machines, but his eyes were locked on one thing: the boy lying on the gurney. Grace stood frozen, flanked by two officers. The metallic jingle of the Lamborghini key still hung in her hand like evidence of a crime. "Ethan!" Alexander's voice cracked slightly as he hurried to his son's side. He bent over, brushing the blonde hair from the boy's forehead. Ethan's breathing was steadier now, the oxygen mask doing its job. "Sir," the older police officer began. "This woman," Grace interrupted, her voice trembling but firm. "I'm the one who brought him here. He was alone. He was—" Alexander straightened, his cold gaze shifting to her. "You took my car?" Grace swallowed hard. "Yes, because the drivers were gone, security wasn't there, and your son was on the side of the road struggling to breathe. I had no time." The younger officer looked between them. "She was going well over the speed limit. Sir, do you want to press?" Alexander raised his hand to silence him. His eyes, sharp as glass, stayed on Grace. "Why didn't you call me?" "I did," she said quietly, "but you didn't answer." For a moment, the only sound was the rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor. The doctor entered, removing his gloves. "Mr. Sterling, your son is stable now, but another 15 minutes and we'd be having a very different conversation." Alexander's jaw tightened. His eyes flicked back to Grace. She stood tall, even with the officers beside her, refusing to shrink. "You're saying," he asked slowly, "that you risked your job, your freedom, and your life to get my son here on time?" Grace nodded once. "That's exactly what I'm saying." The younger officer stepped forward. "Sir, we still need a statement. We can either take her in now or—" "No," Alexander said suddenly, his voice sharp. "She's not going anywhere." The officers looked surprised. "Sir?" "She stays," Alexander repeated, his tone leaving no room for argument. "I'll handle this." The police exchanged a look, then reluctantly stepped back. Grace felt her knees weaken with relief, but Alexander's gaze still burned into her. "We'll talk later," he said, his voice low. Before she could respond, a loud voice came from the hallway. "Is this the woman who stole the billionaire's Lamborghini?" Reporters. In seconds, the ER entrance was flooded with cameras and microphones. Someone had tipped them off. Flashes lit up the room and questions were shouted over one another. "Ma'am, did you steal the car? Is it true you're a housekeeper? Were you trying to ransom the boy?" Grace's chest tightened. "That's not what happened." But her words were drowned out. Alexander stepped in front of her, his tall frame blocking the reporter's view. "Not here. Not now," he said firmly to the press. Security began pushing them back, but the damage was done. This wasn't just a rescue anymore. It was a public spectacle. Alexander turned to Grace again. "You're coming with me," he said. "To the mansion?" she asked cautiously. "No," he replied. "To my lawyer's office. We're going to make sure the world hears the truth. My way." Grace didn't know whether to feel relieved or afraid. But as she glanced back at Ethan, still breathing, still alive, she knew one thing for certain. Whatever storm was coming next, it was worth it. The court of public opinion, the black SUV rolled away from the hospital, its tinted windows hiding Grace and Alexander from the swarm of reporters left behind. The Lamborghini, now parked under police watch, looked like a silent witness to everything that had happened. Grace sat in the back seat across from Alexander. She kept her hands folded in her lap, the Lamborghini key still there, cold against her palm. For several minutes, neither spoke. The city slid by in silence, tall glass towers reflecting the late morning sun. Grace could feel Alexander's gaze on her, but she kept her eyes on the passing streets. Finally, he broke the silence. "Do you understand what this looks like to the public?" Grace met his eyes. "Yes. A black maid in a billionaire sports car. I know exactly what people will think before they even hear me speak." Alexander didn't flinch. You're right, which is why we need to control the story before it controls us. Grace frowned. Us? He leaned back. You work in my house. What people say about you will reflect on me. And right now, the news is already running with their version of events. You're the mystery woman who stole a Lamborghini. Grace shook her head. They don't care about the truth, just what sells. That's where my lawyers come in, Alexander said. We'll make them care. The SUV pulled into an underground parking garage. They stepped out and entered a sleek elevator that carried them to the 20th floor of a downtown tower. The doors opened to a glass-walled conference room where 3 people sat waiting, 2 lawyers and a woman in a sharp suit Grace recognized from the news, Claire Mendez, a top crisis PR strategist. Alexander introduced Grace to the team, then got straight to business. Tell them exactly what happened, every detail. Grace took a deep breath and told them everything. Ethan's phone call, the empty driveway, the keys on the table, the desperate decision. She didn't skip over the part where she knew she might get arrested. When she finished, Claire tapped a pen against her notepad. It's a good story, too good for them to twist if we act fast. But we'll need visuals, photos of Ethan safe in the hospital, statements from the doctor, maybe even security footage showing him struggling when you found him. One of the lawyers added, and we should release it before the tabloids get more creative. They're already implying you might have been involved in him being on that road in the first place. Grace's stomach turned. That's not true. They don't need truth, Claire said bluntly. They need headlines. We'll give them a better one. Within an hour, Alexander's team had a press statement drafted. It told the world about Grace's quick thinking, her heroic drive, and how her actions had saved Ethan's life. Alexander would give the statement himself on camera, making it clear that she was a hero, not a thief. But while the lawyers and PR experts worked, Grace stepped to the window and looked out at the city below. She knew the truth was out there now, but she also knew public opinion was unpredictable. Some people would call her a savior. Others would never see past the image of her behind the wheel of that car. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. A message from an unknown number. You think you're safe now? Wait until the real story comes out. Grace stared at the screen, her heart pounding. Who could have sent that? She slid the phone back into her pocket, not ready to share it with anyone, not yet. Because whatever real story they thought they had, she had no idea what they meant. But she would soon find out. The truth comes out. The conference room's atmosphere felt heavier than the thick glass walls that surrounded it. Grace kept her eyes on the table as Alexander's lawyers finalized the press statement. She could hear the faint clicks of keyboards, the rustle of paper, but her mind was on the message she had received just an hour earlier. You think you're safe now? Wait until the real story comes out. The words looped in her head. Who could have sent them? Someone from the press trying to intimidate her? A stranger online, or someone who knew something similar? He didn't. Across the table, Alexander leaned forward. Grace, he said, pulling her back to the present. The press conference is in an hour. Claire wants you to stand next to me when I make the statement. Grace blinked. You want me on camera? Yes, he said without hesitation. It's the fastest way to shut down the people who are calling you a thief. You stand there. The world sees you, they hear me call you a hero. The story changes overnight. Grace hesitated. And if they dig deeper, if they try to twist this? They won't get the chance, Alexander said firmly. Not if we take control now. She nodded slowly, but the message in her pocket still burned in the back of her mind. An hour later, the lobby. The lobby of the building was packed. Reporters stood behind a velvet rope, cameras poised, microphones ready. The bright white lights made everything feel like a stage. Alexander stepped up to the podium, Grace just to his right. For a moment, the flashing cameras made her want to turn away, but she forced herself to stand tall. Good afternoon, Alexander began, his deep voice cutting through the noise. This morning, my son Ethan suffered a medical emergency while away from home. If it weren't for the quick thinking and extraordinary courage of one person, Grace Johnson, he might not be alive right now. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Yes, Alexander continued, she took my Lamborghini without asking. And yes, she drove it far above the speed limit. But she did so for one reason only, to get my son to the hospital in time. She risked her own freedom to save his life. That is not theft. That is heroism. Grace glanced at him. His tone was unshakable, but his eyes softened when they met hers for half a second. When he finished, reporters shouted questions. Ms. Johnson, did you hesitate before taking the car? Do you think Mr. Sterling will reward you for what you did? Were you and the boy alone often? The conference room's atmosphere felt heavier than the thick glass walls that surrounded it. Grace kept her eyes on the table as Alexander's lawyers finalized the press statement. She could hear the faint clicks of keyboards, the rustle of paper, but her mind was on the message she had received just an hour earlier. You think you're safe now? Wait until the real story comes out. The words looped in her head. Who could have sent them? Someone from the press trying to intimidate her? A stranger online? Or someone who knew something she didn't? Across the table, Alexander leaned forward. Grace, he said, pulling her back to the present. The press conference is in an hour. Claire wants you to stand next to me when I make the statement. Grace blinked. You want me on camera? Yes, he said without hesitation. It's the fastest way to shut down the people who are calling you a thief. You stand there, the world sees you, they hear me call you a hero. The story changes overnight. Grace hesitated. And if they dig deeper? If they try to twist this? They won't get the chance, Alexander said firmly. Not if we take control now. She nodded slowly, but the message in her pocket still burned in the back of her mind. An hour later, the lobby. The lobby of the building was packed. Reporters stood behind a velvet rope, cameras poised, microphones ready. The bright white lights made everything feel like a stage. Alexander stepped up to the podium, Grace just to his right. For a moment, the flashing cameras made her want to turn away, but she forced herself to stand tall. Good afternoon, Alexander began, his deep voice cutting through the noise. This morning, my son Ethan suffered a medical emergency while away from home. If it weren't for the quick thinking and extraordinary courage of one person, Grace Johnson, he might not be alive right now. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Yes, Alexander continued, she took my Lamborghini without asking, and yes, she drove it far above the speed limit, but she did so for one reason only, to get my son to the hospital in time. She risked her own freedom to save his life. That is not theft. That is heroism. Grace glanced at him. His tone was unshakable, but his eyes softened when they met hers for half a second. When he finished, reporters shouted questions. Ms. Johnson, did you hesitate before taking the car? Do you think Mr. Sterling will reward you for what you did? Were you and the boy alone often? That last question stung. It carried an ugly implication. Grace took a deep breath. I don't care about rewards. I care that Ethan is alive, that's all. Claire quickly stepped in, ending the questions. The cameras kept flashing as they left the building, but Grace felt a shift in the air. The crowd didn't just see her as the maid anymore. They saw her as part of a story worth listening to. Later that evening, the mansion, Ethan was back home resting in his room. Grace stood in the kitchen pouring herself a glass of water when footsteps approached. Grace, a soft voice said. She turned to see Ethan standing there, pale but smiling. I wanted to say thank you, he whispered, for saving me, and for not letting them make me look weak. Grace crouched down so they were eye level. You're not weak, Ethan. You're stronger than most grown-ups I know. His eyes sparkled for a second, then dimmed. But there's something I didn't tell Dad. Something I should tell you. Grace's chest tightened. What is it? Ethan glanced over his shoulder to make sure they were alone. I didn't just sneak out to meet friends. I was trying to meet someone. Someone who told me they knew something about Dad. They said it was important. Grace's mind flashed back to the anonymous text. Her grip on the glass tightened. Who? She asked. I don't know their name, Ethan said, but they said they could prove that someone close to Dad was not who they pretend to be. Grace felt a chill run down her spine. Whoever sent her that warning message, it wasn't random. It was connected to Ethan's morning escape, and maybe even to someone inside Alexander Sterling's world. She looked toward the hallway where shadows stretched long against the marble floor. If there was a hidden truth in this house, she was already tangled in it. And she wasn't sure if Alexander would thank her for finding it, or wish she'd stayed silent. Redemption and reward. The next morning, Grace awoke to a house that felt strangely still. No clatter of dishes in the kitchen, no hum of conversation from the staff, just silence. She stepped into the hallway, the marble floor cold under her feet. As she passed Ethan's room, she saw the boy still asleep, his breathing calm. Relief washed through her, but the weight of his words from last night still pressed on her mind. Someone close to Dad isn't who they pretend to be. Grace headed downstairs where she found Alexander in the study, staring at something on his laptop. His jaw was tight, his hands gripping the edge of the desk. He looked up when she entered. Close the door. Grace did. I had my security team look into that message you got, Alexander said without preamble. It wasn't from the press. It came from a phone registered under a fake name, burner device, but it was pinging near the estate yesterday morning. Someone here sent it. Grace's stomach dropped. Do you think it's connected to why Ethan left the house? Alexander nodded grimly. Yes, and I think I know who. He turned the laptop toward her. On the screen was security footage from the day before, grainy but clear enough to see. Ethan was speaking to someone at the side gate of the property. The person wore a cap pulled low, but when they lifted their head slightly, Grace recognized them instantly. Linda Perez, head of security. Grace frowned. But why would she? Alexander cut in. Linda's been with me for years. I trusted her. But I just found out she's been leaking private information to a competitor, someone who's been trying to undermine my company for months. Yesterday, she used Ethan to try to get me out of the house so they could access my private server. If you hadn't found him when you did. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. Grace could imagine the rest. What are you going to do? She asked. I've already had her taken into custody, Alexander said. But the point is, I wouldn't have even known about this if you hadn't acted the way you did. You didn't just save Ethan's life, Grace. You may have saved my company too. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The morning light slanted through the blinds, striping the desk in gold. Then Alexander leaned back. I owe you more than an apology. Grace shook her head. I don't want money. I just want my job back. And to know Ethan will be safe. Alexander smiled faintly. You'll have both. But you're getting more than that. 2 days later, the garden ceremony. Word had spread, not just about the stolen Lamborghini, but about the truth. How a housekeeper risked everything to save the son of one of the richest men in the city. Alexander insisted on holding a small ceremony in the estate gardens, with Ethan by Grace's side. In front of the gathered staff, a few reporters, and even some of Alexander's business associates, he stepped forward with a microphone. This is Grace Johnson, he began, his voice carrying across the lawn. She has worked in my home for years with dedication and quiet strength. Yesterday, she showed a kind of bravery that no paycheck can buy. She didn't hesitate. She didn't think about herself. She thought only of my son. And for that, my family owes her more than we can ever repay. He turned to Grace. So, starting today, Grace will no longer be an employee in my house. She will be part of it. She will have her own home here on the estate, full rights, and she'll also be the new head of family security. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Grace's eyes widened. Mr. Sterling. Alexander, he corrected gently. And there's one more thing. From behind him, a staff member drove forward a familiar golden-orange Lamborghini. It gleamed in the sunlight. This, Alexander said, is no longer mine. It's yours. You proved you can handle it better than I ever could. The crowd erupted in applause. Ethan hugged her tightly, his voice muffled against her shoulder. Told you you're a hero. Grace laughed softly, tears stinging her eyes. I'm just glad you're here to say that. As the applause faded, Grace looked around at the faces, some smiling, some still surprised, and felt something she hadn't felt in years. She belonged. And though she knew life on the estate would never be quiet again, she also knew one thing for sure. Sometimes the hardest decisions lead to the most unexpected rewards.